We have such a hard time discussing certain kinds of allegations both in life and online. But of course, like many things, interfacing with one another online only tends to exaggerate our difference of opinions and differences in approach. Nevertheless, it still stands to be true that we consistently fail victims and survivors of vicious acts that self-destruct them of their personal and bodily autonomy. We fail in how we understand their testimonies, in our reactions, in our interpretations, in law, and in justice. No matter how messy or nonsensical certain allegation-turned dramas online get, I never want to misconstrue that very overt fact. And make no mistake, the SuperMega drama is messy. It's a spectacle made up of interpersonal dynamics between friends, between associates, misunderstood power dynamics between employer and employee. There are obvious vendettas and end goals here, and it all surrounds one person's initial video that detailed not just her sexual assault, but how she believed her discussion of it led to not only the fallout of her friendships with Matt and Ryan of SuperMega, but to the betrayal and isolation she felt they inflicted upon her. This is one of the most convoluted ordeals I've seen online this year, and most of it seems to have surmounted to nothing, save the elevated levels of disgust people have developed towards those who bring forth allegations, as well as the pause or plausible end of the SuperMega channel. Whether all the parties involved here knew this or not, had this unfolded in a different way, quite a few conversations could have genuinely been had, like how to thoughtfully approach a survivor when the accused is a friend or a close colleague, establishing what the role of an employer is when an employee allegedly commits a heinous act, and what that employer's responsibility to the victim is, if any. We could have gained a better understanding on the differences between a traditional company versus a non-traditional YouTuber company and how the latter should respond to such allegations. Instead, what we got is a large amount of sheer disrespect, a bit of martyring, and a goddamn conspiracy. But hey, coulda, shoulda, woulda, right? As I always say, I'm not a drama channel, so this is not a deep dive into the SuperMega drama, though you will be provided with a timeline, background, and additional details as needed as we move along. Rather than regurgitating the happenings that a lot of you probably already watch unfold in real time, I want to focus on how this event was covered by commentators, unveiling my continued frustration with internet logic, and hopefully pulling out all of the gray in this situation that most people have pretended was not there. So without digging around any further, let's get into it. Before completely devolving, let's catch up on what's happened here. This section can serve as a refresher for any of you who haven't looked at this thing since it kind of wrapped up in the last month or so. In this past July, internet personality, artist, and not safe for work cosplayer Lex Updog posted a 2-hour-long video to her largely unused YouTube channel titled My Experience with Dawn DRRR and SuperMega. She not only alleged that SuperMega's former channel artist Dawn sexually assaulted her in November of 2021, but she also spoke up about her perception on the treatment she received from mainly Matt but Ryan as well in the subsequent years following her assault.
For the past year and a half, almost 2 now, I've been keeping a secret that I didn't need to for someone else's sake, and that someone else was someone very close to me, as was the person who hurt me. At no point was I supported enough to even be incentivized to keep a secret for them, but I did out of loyalty.
According to my notes, the first 40 minutes of Lex's video is spent building the foundation of how distant and unfamiliar her relationship with Dawn, who at the time of the assault was her partner.
So I feel like he was obsessed with like the idea of me, but when I would talk, he just wouldn't listen. Like he didn't actually like me.
She tried to articulate to the audience why she continued to date Dawn after this assault. This explanation to some was not understood.
From like November to when I stopped talking to Dawn, I just kind of did whatever he wanted. When we hung out in November, we started calling one-on-one a little bit more, and then it tapered off again up until around April when we were planning on meeting each other for Creator Clash. Then we started calling again, and I was thinking to myself all the time that I knew like he was just using me.
In short, Lex had yet to process her experience truly and fully with Dawn until a year removed. This is unfortunately not unfamiliar or uncommon territory for me, so her explanation came at no surprise to me. According to trauma counselor and licensed social worker Jessica Tapana, there can be a number of reasons as to why a survivor does not immediately report or speak on their own sexual assaults. Removed from Lex, many survivors develop post-traumatic stress disorder or its sister, rape trauma syndrome, in a manner that is not obvious or immediately detectable by a layman. When survivors know they will be frequently put into the same space as their attacker, they tend to become more hypervigilant and avoidant. Amidst this development, many survivors, mainly women, do not initially label their experience as sexual assault or rape. It sometimes takes years for women to reach that point. Admittance to yourself first of what you survived is a great deal harder than what most people would understand. Admitting that you were victimized often makes survivors feel weak and ashamed. The emotional toll, which can also manifest physically, is a large burden to carry. That being said, Lex's first mention of relaying her experience to an outside person was almost a year later, around Creator Clash in 2022. She first told her now boyfriend Ethanus online, and then former SuperMega at-will employee Layton. Because Dawn was the channel artist of SuperMega, and because Lex was close friends and intermittent colleagues with Matt and Ryan, Lex knew that even though Dawn was a resident of Germany, there would be situations like this where she would have to be in his physical presence if SuperMega kept ties with him.
It occurs to me that I'm gonna need to talk to more people about the Dawn thing, what happened with him, to give context to why I don't want to see him. Why would I ask my friend to make sure I don't see someone? It genuinely would have to be a good reason, and I thought it was, so that's why I just told them.
With this in mind, she told first Ryan, then Matt of the alleged assault. Here is when Lex really began diving in and forming a timeline of SuperMega's treatment of her. To quickly catalog her complaints to the duo, and I won't be mincing any words here, she believed that they did not care about her experiences as her friends, approached her situation in a very corporate America fashion, covered up her allegation towards Dawn while making her feel isolated, and treated both herself and their other friend Rav poorly when they lived at SuperMega's plex or place of business for months, and subsequently made them feel uncomfortable to the point of homelessness.
Then when Matt calls me 2 days later, 2 nights later, I tell him what happened, and he tells me, oh man, this is a bummer. Like, this sucks. Like, right after the Jackson thing, this year is just so crazy already. Like, there's so much going on, and now this? I'm asking to, like, make sure this guy is physically removed from me when we hang out, and Matt, his response is immediately business with the Jackson mention, and then he says something insane that he would go on to repeat all summer to multiple people. He said to me, after I told him about his friend that sexually assaulted me, his friend and employee, he said, SuperMega's my magnum opus, and I would hate for something to mess it up.
These are all pretty hefty claims, enough to destroy someone's entire platform, really. And initially, that is effectively what happened. The SuperMega fan base turned in on itself for a bit and ran Matt and Ryan for filth. There were and are a large number of criticisms about some of the things that Lex said in her video, and we're gonna get into that a little later on. But shortly after Lex's video, the previously mentioned Layton hopped onto Twitch and streamed for 3 hours and made several additional allegations towards SuperMega, mainly surrounding homophobia and other misbehaviors, some being of a more sexual nature, like allegedly non-consensually exposing themselves to him. There was a lot more said throughout that 3-hour stream that I just frankly don't care to get into because of the nature that I believe surrounds Layton's narrative in particular. Speaking of questionable narrators though, we have another character to add to the story. Morg Pie, or Morgan, who is a streamer and sex worker, also streamed about SuperMega. Her story surrounded Matt's alleged cheating scandals and using her for sex. Lex and SuperMega's mutual friend Rav also made a show of support for Lex on Twitter. Dawn, the accused, issued an apology to Lex on Twitter, then a correction. From there, there, we begun to see the spin out of commentary videos. Nick is Not Green, or Green is Not Nick, is probably the primary commentary channel that showed unwavering support, for better or for worse, for Lex, and was one of the first channels to drop a video about the allegations. His video was largely labeled a hit piece and seen as contentious since he published it with a seemingly unmovable opinion on SuperMega prior to their responses and sides of the stories were released. Nick's initial video spawned a critique campaign of sorts from the likes of channels like whatever I'm gonna put on screen right here. After the release of SuperMega's responses, Matt's video is the most comprehensive, coming in at a little under 50 minutes, Ryan's at under 10 minutes, and Jim's under 8. Matt's video stands to be the best received, followed by Ryan's, while Jim's is widely regarded as a throwaway and a failure. After Matt and Ryan's responses were released, the tide started to turn against Lex in a very unexpected way. There was and is a lot of talk about all these SuperMega detractors, we'll call them, conspiring together with a goal of causing the downfall of Matt and Ryan. And that is what we're gonna dive into. To begin, I created a nifty little diagram to help you guys understand the connections between all parties involved here. There are so many characters involved with this whole thing, and I want it to be as clear as possible, so there it is.
But, well, there it is.
What you need to know for this section before we get into the coverage of this situation is that Lex, Leighton, Morgan, Raph, Nick, and Ethan are all connected to one another in some type of way. Each party has a reason to be upset with SuperMega. Lex's reasoning should be obvious. Raph is a close friend of Lex and has some of his own negative experiences with SuperMega. Nick and Ethan both support Lex as her friend and partner. Leighton's employment was terminated by Matt and Ryan, and he is also friends with Lex. And lastly, Morgan felt sexually used by Matt and is also friends with Leighton, I believe. And because of these offline connections alongside Matt's response, many believe this whole drama to be some type of elaborate planned conspiracy. Now, in Matt's video, he intentionally separated Lex from this bunch.
I, however, don't blame Lex at all for how she may feel.
But he clearly believes, at the very least, both Leighton and Morgan are seeking vengeance against both him and his company.
We were fully expecting more of Leighton's close friends to eventually speak out about us for one reason or another, and now a lot of them have. Now, I want to make something very clear. I am not downplaying Lex's situation with Dawn or her coming forward with that. I am in no way saying that her coming forward with the Dawn situation is a ploy by Leighton to get us canceled. I think it's very brave that Lex came forward, and I am not contributing that to Leighton. That was poorly handled by me and Ryan, and we take full responsibility. However, there's a lot of other stuff that I think the dots can be connected.
He also called out Nick is Not Green and a couple of other commentators for capitalizing off the entire event.
A lot of people, mainly Leighton and his close friends, have used this as an opportunity to capitalize off of what was initially someone's story of sexual assault.
And to that I say, I am so sick of internet logic. I'm so tired of operating on this assumption that everything is bigger than what it actually is. The most pervasive thing I have seen throughout this entire beef between Lex and crew and the boys of SuperMega is recontextualization. Almost every single person involved here has recontextualized their experiences with one another after processing, maybe overthinking, and comparing them to the seemingly similar experiences of their friends. Perhaps when Leighton, Morgan, Raph, and Lex all begun to understand each other's feelings surrounding Matt and Ryan and their past relationships with them, maybe the duo came off in a worse light. For example, have you not noticed that the same text messages Lex references in her video to show Matt and Ryan's displeasure towards her are the same text messages that Matt uses to show that he was supportive of her?
I ended the call by voicing complete support for Lex and telling her that Ryan and I were here for her and we would figure out what to do. For context, here are the text messages right before and right after that call, showing that I was supportive. I was not completely callous like it was made out to be.
I don't know why or how, but somehow I had no dialogue with Matt for 2 days after my call with Ryan, my call that made me feel a lot better. And my call with Matt was probably the worst thing I could have imagined. That's how the conversation went. You know, he's apologizing about Teddy. I booked my flight, so I told him when. This is what he says after. Very nice words, right? I personally think him and Ryan did lots of talking before he decided to call me back, because his phone's with him all the time. He could have called me back at any point. I think by the time I got off the phone with Ryan, it was probably already too late for me to like tell things how I wanted to, because it wasn't my choice anymore.
It is all a matter of perspective, and perspectives can change over time. That doesn't mean somebody was lying. Matt and Lex have both contextualized those messages to the image of the person that they had in their mind at that time. While I am unsure if I support the idea of the guys covering up the alleged assault, I can most certainly see Lex's perspective on it with the fallout of their friendship and the talk of providing her with money for accommodations, which she stated seemed like a bribe.
Things have been getting so weird over the course of AX because I realized that I was losing contact with Matt and Ryan. That night I went with Matt and Jem back to Matt's place, and we all went to his living room. He has 3 couches, and we're all sitting on one each by ourselves. And Jem essentially immediately went to sleep. After Jem fell asleep, it was just me and Matt, and this is like the first time we had gotten to talk one-on-one since the phone call that I made to him. So we catch up a little bit. To my knowledge, I don't think we talked about Dawn at all, but one thing that did come up was Matt offered to pay for me to live somewhere, like down payment plus several months, which if you're in LA, if you know anything about the housing market in LA, is an exorbitant amount of money. Jim's asleep next to us, just me and him in his living room, and he says this. Most freaked out I think I've ever been by him, aside from the phone call, obviously. I immediately said no. At this point, I didn't fully distrust him. I just had a gut feeling that no one gives you that amount of money for no reason without something to gain from it. It felt like a bribe.
It is of no surprise to me that Lex, 2 years removed from the alleged assault and 1 year removed from being vocal about it with her friends, would come out with such criticisms towards Matt and Ryan. When I watched and listened to her video several times over, it was very akin to listening to any person trying to connect the dots for how and why she felt her friendship fizzled out with someone. Sometimes we overthink a bit too much. Sometimes our realizations are a bit unfocused, a bit messy, a bit overzealous. And that is partially why I was surprised to see her air her grievances about the duo online. But then again, am I really? We live in an internet-dominated age where it has somewhat been normalized to talk about a lot of things that we have long been taught to keep quiet and out of the public eye. I've said this time and time again, but we know way too much about each other and it distresses us. I don't think that someone being a bad friend, someone doing a mean thing, means that I, as an outsider, need to know about that thing in detail. And I certainly don't think that it means I need to create some type of moral grandstand about it. It is one thing to deeply empathize with Lex with her feelings of isolation and disbelief to the point where you want to show support to her. It's another to completely try to destroy the reputation, the careers, and the lives of her former bad friends. Matt and Ryan are not the accused sexual assaulters here. That's Dawn. And I'm sure people have probably ran him off the internet and given him his internet comeuppance, but I can't help but think that if you are a person who extended Lex some of the benefit of the doubt for her bringing up things that were truly irrelevant to her situation with Dawn or SuperMega, then you can also probably be a person who extends some type of grace to Matt and Ryan. And by grace, I just mean not running a full-fledged hate campaign against them. Because here's the thing, I don't necessarily believe they are innocent of all deeds, nor are they particularly victims. The thing that I think that they misstepped on the most outside of their apparent disregard towards Lex was not leveraging the resources they had available to them to figure out the best solution for both themselves, Lex, and their businesses. And that may sound cold, but hear me out here. They were able to contact an attorney about the $12,000 severance package they wanted to offer to Leighton upon his termination.
We felt bad because this is not an ideal situation, so we decided to give him severance when he left. Severance is a very legal matter, which we didn't realize. It's not as easy as just writing a check and giving it to someone on the way out the door. We essentially had to contract an employment attorney specifically to do this. Here's an email with our lawyer explaining that. We gave Leighton $12,000 in severance, which he admitted on stream he wasn't even supposed to get.
Why did they not contact one of the many freelance human resources or PR firms around LA or on the internet in general to find a better way of handling this?
In Lex's statement, she said that I brought up technicalities over Don's employment, as well as me saying something along the lines of how much it would suck for SuperMega if this got out, and that SuperMega was my magnum opus and I didn't want anything to ruin that. Over the course of the phone call, we did discuss Don's role with SuperMega, and while I don't recall making any of those specific comments, I do know I brought up our business and how Don's actions might affect that. That was completely wrong of me to do. I never should have brought up anything as trivial as that, while Lex was telling me something very difficult.
Clearly, Matt was worried about his business's image, so he could have found a more tactful way to discuss that concern away from Lex. This is one of my problems with businesses ran by influencers and YouTubers who do not actually have a passion for business or running a fair and ethical company. They have the resources and have no idea how to use them, but either seem to not care or don't think to allow someone else who does know how to use them help them. SuperMega's biggest blunder here was maliciously relying on their friendship with Lex to carry them throughout this ordeal. And I say maliciously because when you push responsibility back onto someone else, and this is not even specific to sexual assault survivors, but just anyone who is bringing a problem to you and your first immediate response is to force a solution out of them. I'm not sure what else to call that besides malicious.
And he just kept saying things. He was like, would it still bother you if we like still worked with him? And I started like being like, I don't know. That's not really my decision. I can't really tell you that because that's not what I was calling for it. He's an online Twitter artist. I would see him regardless. It's not about that. It's about me not seeing him in person so I can like relax and like process stuff. You know, I wasn't asking him to like kick him out and make him homeless. I just wanted him to like stay at Matt's or like don't bring him to the office if you know I'm there, basically. It wasn't like the hardest ask ever, but he acted like I was trying to make him go bankrupt.
I can understand not knowing how to handle something like this with grace, especially when it deals with a personal friend and another friend who was also on your payroll. Generally speaking, people are messy and often lack awareness of their own feelings and how to convey them effectively. Now throw a serious allegation at them that deals with two of their friends in a he said, she said situation, we would just be watching most people flounder.
We didn't expect this from Don. Nobody expects their friend to do something this serious to another friend.
What I don't understand is, again, having the resources to do better and not using them. Friend or not, it shows a genuine lack of care to those around you. Not just Lex, who should have been the first person on their minds here, but also the other friends and employees around the accused. If they genuinely believed Lex, even if they stumble initially with excessively questioning her, I would have expected a different amalgamation of emotions to eventually surface within them. Anger, intense disgust, a need for vengeance even, or perhaps the desire to keep the people you care about out of the proximity of someone who allegedly victimized one of your friends. And to give them credit where credit is due, Matt and Ryan spoke to this and apologized to Lex without pretense. Rather than persecuting SuperMega on the internet cross, I want you guys to understand one thing. This is the sort of shit that most survivors go through. They often have to extend an ungodly amount of patience and understanding to those around them. They have to deal with the constant questions, the silver linings, their friends trying to find the facts and the what ifs.
I was getting asked about like how things happened and stuff, like very inquisitively when I was on the phone with Ryan, and that was the one thing that I thought was weird, because if I believed someone, I wouldn't be asking that many questions. I'd just be like, you know, I don't need graphic detail.
It is not only exhausting, it is suffocating. And it gives you the sense that what happened to you does not matter to your friends as much as their own conscience does. Optimistically, people do this as a gut reaction because they don't want to believe that this horrible thing happened to a person they care about. It is natural to immediately question, but it is more advisable to lead with the most basic questions of, are you okay? How can I support you? When Matt stated in his video that he pushed all the responsibility on what actions to take onto Lex, this is what that means. I feel like many commentators glossed over this point of contention and either tried to be overly emotional and use these inactions or misactions as pretense for the duo being horrible people, or opposingly as a way to point at Lex and say that she was asking for way too much. Matt and Ryan's actions may speak to their character in some capacity, sure. I wouldn't know since we don't know each other. But for the purposes of our conversation, as people who are not a part of this fiasco, I more so believe that it can speak to a greater problem with how we approach survivors. And that can also be seen in the coverage of this entire event. But to even expand past that, commentators' desire to operate on internet logic when it comes to more serious allegations is becoming too much. It's too much. Oh my damn, the internet logic of it all. I'm sure you guys are probably picking up what I'm putting down already, but internet logic to me means removing real world context from a situation and subsequently your analysis of said situation. It means pretending as if people are black and white, good or evil, one or the other. Internet logic is also used very frequently as a way to grandstand. This drama, scandal, whatever you want to call it, is riddled with intuitive bias and obscuring of fact and just an overall lack of understanding of how to talk about sexual assault allegations as well as the fallout of them in a manner that is respectful and unspiteful. Nick of left-leaning commentary channel nickisnotgreen has been massively critiqued over his coverage of this situation. He is yet another leg of the conspiracy since his platform is so large and is widely revered by those within that type of commentary space. One of the primary points of contention with the SuperMega drama and online allegations in general are the facts. We have long since misconstrued what a fact is versus what an interpretation of one is. A majority of the channels critiquing Nick lean heavily into the argument that he does not care about the facts.
And Nick being the worst here, literally outright saying he doesn't give a fuck about finding the truth to the situation here, and will accuse someone of being a rapist and SuperMega for covering up a sexual assault with no evidence whatsoever aside from his friend's fucking word.
I find that Nick is Not Green's coverage is not only biased, but harmful to everyone involved.
You did not add much, you just summarized the situation, but summarized it in a way that was entirely biased and ignoring nuance.
And by Nick's own testimony, I would have to agree with a caveat.
I've still received several comments on the original video claiming that I put out my video about Lex without waiting for SuperMega to respond and that I was taking a side before hearing everybody's sides. And I thought I made this clear before, but of course I'm gonna take the side of a personal friend of mine when she comes out with a story about her own sexual assault. This isn't like an online, like normal thing where I look at all the facts and I make a decision. No. My friend was assaulted and never felt like she was able to be heard.
Nick chooses to stand by his friend Lex, and when he does so, he is taking her word on her alleged sexual assault with 100% certainty, as any friend should. However, he also takes her word on everything else as well, even things that do not directly correspond with or involve her. In her video, Lex brought up match cheating scandals, some light accusations of possible alcoholism or over partying.
He looks at us dead in the eye and takes another drink. And it's like funny the first couple of times, but then when he does it like 5 times in the same night, it's like freaky and you get worried for people's health. But we're like literally just trying to like keep him from like doing creep shit to people because we didn't know what the fuck he was gonna do.
Rumors about Leighton, Matt and Ryan's alleged despondence towards their deceased friend's suicide, some type of employee-led theft at SuperMega, and though this has not been made a point of contention, she extensively discussed her friend Rav's partner's attempted suicide and his following depressive state. Similar to Leighton, Lex, outside of her actual alleged sexual assault and her perception on the deterioration of her friendship with SuperMega, did throw anything and everything at the wall to see what would stick. And dissimilar to Leighton, I hope Lex's reasoning for doing so matched what she outlined in her updated description box of her video. My perspective was that if I talked about so many things that no one could say something like Lex made this up, because too many things happened that I couldn't have even dreamt of making up, rather than just being really vague about what happened. In doing so, it made my story hard to understand for many, giving people who had no reason to be charitable a reason to outright disbelieve me. It also doesn't help that I have an individual around me who has made this worse for me by taking my trust in them for granted by using it as a platform to say a lot of really not okay things while I was out seeing a movie. I would have never talked if I knew something like that would happen, because it has seriously made me regret saying anything despite the relief I felt prior. I don't know if she's distancing herself from Leighton or if she's talking about someone else there, but it still stands to be true that Lex did speak on things that did not directly involve her, and I don't believe added anything to her story regarding neither Dawn nor SuperMega. Unfortunately, for particularly young women coming forward online with any type of experience that outlines any bad behaviors of men, their accounts must meet very particular criteria for them to be received well both in the moment and in hindsight. She has to be clear, concise, and have documented proof of every single account she makes, even if the account is based on her interpretation. And that's where a lot of the coverage of the situation falls short. Both sides of it label perceptions as facts. If you're a part of Nick's camp, which I would say leans more into unwavering trust of Lex's account, you probably believe that the fact of the matter is Matt and Ryan mishandled Lex's allegations towards Dawn, emotionally manipulated her, and plausibly rendered her homeless.
Like the Dawn thing by itself, I've been assaulted before, unfortunately. It's an experience I myself can handle. But when it has to do with other people and be able to tell how they think of you through their actions, it becomes unavoidable. Like, I don't have to see Don anymore. What he did to me, I don't have to think about. But when someone is treating me actively different all the time in front of me, my only friends in LA that my only plan of like staying somewhere, my only like safe place, didn't want to help me, said they did nothing but helped me, and then gaslit me about it and made me homeless. Cause like, sure, maybe saying made me homeless is maybe extreme, but one, how else would you say that? Two, we could have talked.
If you are a massive critic of Lex, then you may believe that the facts are that Lex lied about things mainly to do with Matt and exaggerated SuperMega's behavior towards her. You probably believe the friendship ended over miscommunications and simply growing apart. Those are both interpretations of the events that operate on a flawed line of logic that vaguely oversimplifies the happenings, in my humble opinion. The problem with internet logic here is that it persistently oversimplifies and misrepresents people. People are not evil or horrid because they are emotionally driven or unsure, because they operate on instinct. In the physical world, we only become evil when we intentionally ignore our wrongdoings and the emotions of others and viciously proceed. All of the nuances that we struggle to explain online when trying to unpack allegations of any caliber are the nuances that most of us truly innately understand, or at the very least, we're aware of the social parameters of. Specifically relating to the SuperMega situation, Nick frequently states that this would have been an easy thing to have taken care of given the facts.
Lex finally told Matt on the phone, and Matt agrees that he should not have asked Lex what he should do in this scenario. It was very obvious what he should have done, and he decided to be passive about it.
And his opposition states that SuperMega did everything they were supposed to do, given the facts. And they're both wrong. They're both wrong. But first, let's establish what the true facts here actually are. A sexual act occurred between Lex and Dawn. Lex believes she was sexually assaulted. And keep in mind that it's not said in a manner of disbelief. I assume her accusation to be true, but I can also recognize that the assault itself is not an established fact because there is no evidence. Lex told SuperMega, Ryan first, Matt second, about this assault. Ryan asked additional questions, but verbally supported her via the text we can see. Matt asked additional questions, but verbally supported her via the text messages we can see. Matt and Ryan did not act on Lex's accusation immediately. Matt and Ryan did not fire Dawn immediately.
We selfishly waited until we felt comfortable to have this discussion with Dawn instead of having the victims back immediately.
Matt and Ryan also did not publicly announce why Dawn was fired. Those are the actual confirmed and corroborated facts here. Everything else is pretty much interpretation or conjecture. The fact that Nick is referring to when he deems the situation being an easy one to rectify is of Lex's recount of her experience with SuperMega. Nick believes that because Lex told them of this occurrence, that they should have immediately confronted Dawn, fired him, and made a public announcement about it. The critique campaign being ran against Nick believes that SuperMega approached the situation to the best of their abilities by taking the time to analyze both the stories of Lex and Dawn before making a judgment. Nick's response is driven very much by his emotions, while channels like the ones on screen here are more sterile, or so they believe. The reason why both approaches cause me to recoil is because I believe the answer of why they responded the way that they did, not the answer of how they should have reacted, based on the little that we know, is more nuanced and intertwines between the two. As I keep alluding to, people tend to not only be emotional or only logical. We are both at the same time, all the time. And when you attempt to confine arguments to either one or the other, you will always be wrong. These types of complexities in behavior are often ignored when sexual assault allegations arise because people don't really want to understand the accused. And that makes sense. But Matt and Ryan are not the accused for this particular heinous action, so we can probably afford them some additional level of understanding. The caveat to that statement would be evaluating the impact of their actions. Matt, Ryan, and Jim have all apologized to Lex for the way that they made her feel. They all recognized that she was hurt and that she expressed that hurt to them even back then. And they knew that they could have done better than what they did. Matt and Ryan are aware of the pain that they caused her. Matt sympathized with Lex and seemed to understand how she could have felt alienated. There's a lot of reframing that these kinds of channels have done with Matt's response in particular. They often make it seem like Matt sought to disprove every single point that Lex made throughout her video, and this is how many of them came to the conclusion that Lex is a liar with an agenda.
And as I showed in the intro, Lex bold-faced lied about SuperMega not showing her support when she told them about her assault.
I told my friends, and instead of telling me they didn't believe me, they acted just like they didn't, and without saying it. And that's just as bad. I had no support from them. They said they believed me and then gave me no support. That's just not what that means.
Here are the text messages right before and right after that call, showing that I was supportive. I was not completely callous like it was made out to be.
I had no support from them.
But this seemed to be Lex's tactic, as you could tell from earlier, to throw anything and everything at the wall to see what sticks.
Opposingly, creators in the same hemisphere as Nick perceive Matt's response as intentionally selective. Switching gears a little bit here, have you guys ever seen those videos that are titled like disturbing horror movie iceberg, or just heard the phrase in general tip of the iceberg? Like the tip of the iceberg is the most well known and the not so bad stuff, and the further down you get, the darker and colder it gets. Well, on social media, when some type of serious allegation pops up, commentators have a tendency to create icebergs for the person in question. You can reference a channel like iNabbers here. What iNabber typically does is gather any and all negative information surrounding a contentious figure in order to show them in the worst light possible. And that is not necessarily a bad thing. When a person is revealed to be not so great, there is normally a lot more underneath the surface and probably other situations that could form an observable pattern of behavior for that person. Showing a pattern of behavior rather than a one-off instance is a good way to convince more people that a public figure deserves condemnation. SuperMega's content is not the kind of stuff that I like to watch, so I won't pretend to know their careers forward and backwards, but this is the first time I've heard of any discourse surrounding them on a large enough scale where it penetrates my YouTube algorithm. The first video I came across for this was actually Matt's, and then I watched a video from the channel Mika's Rhetoric and became thoroughly confused. My point is, there may not have been a broad public awareness of any form of negative patterns of behavior from Matt and Ryan, so Lex, Nick, Leighton, and Mordecai begun to form a narrative. And keep in mind, forming a narrative does not mean that the one doing so is lying. Starting with Lex, her video did Iceberg SuperMega a bit. Barring her personal experiences with the SuperMega team, she listed off several unrelated events that did not directly serve her initial accusation of sexual assault towards Dawn or indecent and/or unprofessional treatment towards Matt, Ryan, and Jim. Mentioning their deceased friend, the cheating scandals, the unfaithfulness, the overzealous attitude towards the SuperMega channel perhaps, all of these things only serve to paint a picture of bad men corrupted by wealth and influence.
AX SuperMega video I wasn't in I was replaced by the girl he cheated on his girlfriend of 4 years with. So not only did he cheat on his girlfriend and broke up with her, and then she found out after because Jim was living with the new girl. Well, she's still friends with Jim. Like, they're both friends with Jim. He also takes a break with the new girlfriend he's with to basically solicit a sex worker girl that he was into to come live in LA and move from like across the US before he decided that he wanted to go back to the girlfriend that he was just with.
But I refuse to villainize Lex for it, because for her, I understand. A common response to sexual assault is increased anxiety, as well as the awareness that most people outside of your loved ones, and not even them sometimes, will not believe you. No matter how high the numbers get, no matter how many people come forward with their experiences, most of the public do not believe sexual assault survivors unless they meet very, very specific criteria. The survivor must be the perfect victim, untouched by willful sex work, drama, any form of malice, and they must be grateful to those listening to them while seeking no vengeance towards the ones who hurt them. With this in mind, as well as Lex's previous experience with rape and not being believed, she rambled on and on about things that she thought were relevant, that she thought would add to her credibility, but ended up having the complete opposite effect upon particularly Matt's response video. For those of you who are completely and unequivocally on the side of SuperMega, or actually, to be more specific, to those of you who think Lex is just some dumb lying cunt,
this girl's a complete snake bitch.
All that grace that you're willing to extend SuperMega for how they originally handled Lex's situation, maybe give some of that grace to Lex as well. Unless there's some other reason why you believe Lex is undeserving of additional consideration, and best believe we're gonna get into that, because I have thoughts on that as well. So for Lex, I do realize that she, whether this was inadvertent or not, she did try to create an iceberg for SuperMega, and it was unnecessary because her story was enough. Not to villainize, not to cancel, not to condemn, but enough to increase the awareness around the perhaps flawed business practices of large YouTubers, which is a very important and new conversation. Unfortunately, Lex was not the only one who attempted to show some sort of pattern of behavior from SuperMega. We have Nick's first take on the situation, which is purely based on Lex's video. And then we have Morgan and Leighton's testimonies as well, both of which have been heavily scrutinized and kind of torn apart. Without going too into depth with Morgan and Leighton's accusations, they were attempting to add more to the file that was the almost cancellation of SuperMega. But I want to focus on Nick here, who, as previously mentioned, is friends with both Lex and her current partner, Ethan. Nick's videos on SuperMega were dubbed as hit pieces by many due to the overall negative, unwavering framing of Matt and Ryan.
Because this guy's a slime ball, and this guy is actively taking advantage of this situation to go after SuperMega in a way that makes absolutely no sense.
Nick stated that the purpose of creating his videos was to share Lex's story, but that is not how it was received by many. Nick is not a channel that I watch, but I am aware of him. His brand of commentary, where you just kind of borderline live react to something unscripted, isn't really something I vibe with too much. Other than that, all I know about him is that he is left-leaning and has a pretty strong fan base. That being said, let's talk about his bias in his coverage of SuperMega. I have previously mentioned a couple of different times that he is Lex's friend and believes her unquestioningly. That's fine. We should all hope to have friends that believe our stories without scrutiny. But perhaps the question of, should I make a video about this? Should be something that runs through our mind before recording. It's different, is it not, when we are offline with no massive platform to vent and rage to our friends? Is it not different when literally hundreds of thousands of people, for better or for worse, are looking to us for some type of opinion? And I would say measured opinion, but I don't personally believe Nick's opinions to be very measured. In preparation for this video, I watched a few of his most recent videos, and notably, if I was familiar with the topic, I could guess every single opinion and point he was going to make before he did so. And I was able to do so because, like many of you, I am it up with the online leftist script. And that is not a dig at you, my lefties, or at Nick. A political ideology should be something that is easy to find and detect across content styles, because that is how clarity to the masses is gained. But it is to say that when you exist as a leftist creator or a more progressive creator in general, there are certain expectations your audience has for you. Unwavering support of a survivor's testimony is one of those expectations, and you are expected not to publicly question it, which is fine. Again, that's not the point of contention here, at least not for me. The problem is how Nick chose to go about reacting to Lex's video. I believe we should approach all victim testimonies with the assumption of truth without condemning the accused until proof is brought to light. Easier said than done, I know, with a lot of grays. But the point still stands that I don't believe Nick should have treated Lex's story in the same manner as his other videos. From what I can gather, he almost reacts to information, not in the same manner as like a reaction video, but by way of here's every thought from every angle that I can think of from the top of my head. And that's how his initial videos seem to be constructed.
A lot of people even came into the subreddit to roast Matt Watson's music career. One person said, "There's one last thing I want to share before leaving the sub. I did not care for Matt Watson's music career." I'm pretty sure this is a Family Guy reference, but it's still, you know, let's look at the comments. I always thought everyone was just pretending to like his music. As someone who paid to go to one of his shows, I agree. Thank you. I always got downvoted in the sub for calling his music trash. Obviously, none of this has an effect on how he treats people, but of course, if his art sucks, let's fucking dunk on him. He sucks.
He reacted, and whether you believe Lex or not, I believe Nick's reactionary style content undervalued Lex's account. I see a lot of people saying that he did this for money, but I would have to disagree. Nick probably makes an ungodly amount of money from his content. I'm actually going to steer away from his channel with this next point because I don't really want to demoralize channels that I'm not heavily familiar with. But for progressive or left-leaning video essayists or commentators, there is much more to be gained from covering a situation like this than just money. Social capital is how they maintain skin in the game. Creating safe spaces, checking all people's boxes for what a good person is. These are all ways to ensure your audience sticks around even when you fumble. Both a benefit and a downfall for creators making content creation into a career is that they have to become more strategic. They learn what topics they should talk about, which ones they shouldn't, and determine which ones are worth an investment. This is a heavily nihilistic perspective, but I will never let you guys forget that you should never assume that you know anyone who talks to you through a one-way video. But now let's look at the bias of Nick's detractors. Something all of these channels pretty much have in common is that they are ran by men who would be racialized as white in North America and more than likely categorized as cisgendered and straight. In the last 10 years or so, especially with the rise of the Me Too movement, the most powerful demographic in the West, wealthy white men, have been made more accessible to some sort of tangible punishment. Yes, it is only online mostly. It's small and maybe insignificant to the men in question, but it is something. And it is something significant when you view it through a historical lens. Victims and survivors for the first time are able to at least damage the reputations and careers of those who have victimized them. Whether you like this fact or not, it's still true. It is an illusion of power because the damage does not often stick unless the accused are influencers or creators. Influencers are not as powerful or as untouchable as we tend to overcredit them as. They are most frequently just fleeting cogs in a capitalist machine. Their careers will die and fizzle out way more quickly than your traditional ones. But If they play their cards right, it won't matter because they could just be set for life off of a few good years of influencing. Sickening and maddening, but not the points. Influencers are not unbreakable. They are not too big to fail. If there is a drama or an allegation with enough weight behind it, it can truly be their downfall. Reference Illuminati, for example. Mix the apparent fleeting sense of power of an influencer with the overtly negative perceptions of Western white people, specifically white men, and combine it with a sexual assault allegation. What do you get? Your answer should be cancellation or at least strong public backlash. This relates to the commentators that I'm talking about here because I'd be willing to bet that many white men online feel like their demographic is often targeted by online feminism or online leftism. These types of assumptions can sometimes lead to a bias being formed against those who come forward with accusations because of the pattern that these commentators are choosing to identify.
After seeing everything that I could possibly see, I think Lex is the type of person that will have a bad experience with someone and then later claim that that was SA. I think the two examples that she's listed, which is her experience with Dawn and her experience with Jim, are two separate experiences that, to be honest, neither man is at fault for. I'd actually argue that Dawn's account of things are far more believable than Lex's account of things.
Some white men only view victim testimonies like this. Girl tells story, guy is attacked without evidence and without all the facts. The guy is canceled even if he comes back with the facts, and the guy is super canceled if he's white. I keep putting facts in quotations because, again, there's often little to no corroborated facts, save the mutual admission of a sexual act of some kind occurring. Some of these commentators may be overly defensive of Dawn and SuperMega because of how they subconsciously identify patterns of cancellations. None of them seem to have come at this with any level of optimism towards Lex. And that, my friends, is a genuine bias. One of the ways it can manifest is how they tend to question Lex's actions after her alleged sexual assault. Why didn't she just break up with him? Why did she react that way? Why did she let Jim kiss her? Why? And this is a bit bigger than them, but also not, because if they were not so incredibly inclined to not lend Lex any benefit of the doubt, they probably would have come to this thought on their own. Trauma is not logical. There's an entire field of study dedicated to understanding the neurobiological components to trauma and how it can affect a person's manner of thinking and their behavior. Stop expecting people to react to life logically. We are often so illogical in the worst moments of our lives. In the most unconclusive way possible, let's try to answer the question of, should we even talk about these kind of allegations online? I won't keep you waiting. The answer is yes. Yes, we should. And not for the two most obvious reasons you can possibly conjure. No, not just to support and amplify the voices of survivors. And no, not just to find the facts or find out who's lying, but because we do need to see how people are actually processing and engaging with these conversations. That's the only way we can understand the public perception on allegations and if the tides are really and truly turning for survivors in any tangible way. Presently, we still have a long way to go because people are still thinking sexual assault operates in a similar manner to assault. People are still thinking that these sort of allegations can be evaluated from the same exact way you can analyze any other violent crime. And with all the research and data currently available to us right now, paired with the unabashed testimonies of survivors, I find that rather sad. And I think that's where I'm gonna leave this video off for today. And I honestly anticipate not so great reactions from people for this video because I refuse to condemn Lex. But hey, can't please everyone. What are you gonna do? These are actually my thoughts and they're not always gonna align with yours. But that is still gonna be it for me today, guys. Please remember to like and subscribe. I will see you again next time. Bye.